Welcome to my Channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. The coffee mug was still warm. That's what bothered me most. The ceramic pressed against my palm, steam curling up like tiny ghosts in the afternoon light. But I couldn't remember making it. I couldn't remember walking to the kitchen. I couldn't even remember waking up. My phone said 3:47 p.m., Tuesday. But the last thing I remembered was Monday morning. If you're listening to this right now, comfortable in your bed, maybe with the lights dimmed low, I need you to do something for me. Check your phone. Check the time. Remember it. Because by the end of this story, you might understand why I'm so terrified of forgetting. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this, but more importantly, leave a comment telling me the exact time you started listening. Trust me, it matters. The story begins now. My name is Sarah Chen, and I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment in Portland, Oregon. I work from home as a graphic designer, which means my days blend together sometimes. But this was different. It started 3 weeks ago, on a perfectly ordinary Thursday. I'd been working on a logo design for a local brewery, one of those hipster places with exposed brick and Edison bulbs. The deadline was tight, so I'd been pulling long hours. Coffee became my best friend. Sleep became optional. I remember finishing the design around 2 a.m., saving the file, closing my laptop. I brushed my teeth, set my alarm for 8 a.m., and collapsed into bed. The next thing I knew, I was standing in my living room, fully dressed, holding my car keys. My phone said 11:23 a.m. 3 hours, gone, just gone. At first, I laughed it off. Stress does weird things to people, right? I must have gotten up, gotten ready on autopilot, then zoned out. We've all had those moments where we drive somewhere and can't remember the journey. This was just a more extreme version. But then I noticed things. My coffee maker was on, but I only drink tea in the mornings. There was a receipt on my counter from a gas station I'd never been to, time-stamped 9:15 a.m. My laptop was open to a document I didn't remember creating. Just one line typed over and over, the space between seconds. I deleted it, told myself I was overtired, overworked. I needed a break, so I took the day off, binged some true crime podcasts, ordered Thai food from my favorite place on Hawthorne. By evening, I'd almost convinced myself it was nothing. Almost. The next morning, I set multiple alarms. 7:30, 7:45, 8 o'clock. I even put my phone across the room so I'd have to physically get up to turn them off. I was determined to stay present, to pay attention to every single moment. 7:30 came and went. I turned off the alarm, made myself some chamomile tea, sat at my kitchen table with a notebook. I wrote down everything I did. 7:31, made tea 7:35, checked emails 7:42, responded to client about revisions 7:55, started breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast. I was so focused on documenting everything, I didn't notice when it happened. One moment I was writing 8:03, washing dishes. The next, my pen was hovering over the page, and the clock on my microwave said 10:19. The notebook entry ended mid-word. The dishes were done, dried, put away. My breakfast plate was nowhere to be seen. And I was wearing different clothes. I called my best friend Marcus. We'd known each other since college. Both ended up in Portland for the art scene and cheaper rent. He could tell something was wrong before I even spoke. "Sarah, you okay? You sound... Can you come over?" My voice sounded strange, distant. "Please, I need someone else here." He was at my door in 20 minutes, which told me how worried he was. Marcus lived across town in Beaverton, and traffic on 26 was always a nightmare. "Jesus, Sarah, when's the last time you slept? Really slept?" I wanted to tell him everything, but how do you explain losing time without sounding completely unhinged? So I downplayed it, said I'd been having blackouts, probably from stress. He made me promise to see a doctor. Stayed until I'd made an appointment for later that week. But doctors can't fix what's happening to me. I know that now, because it's not just the lost hours. It's what happens during them. I started recording myself. It seemed like the logical next step. If I couldn't remember what happened during these episodes, maybe video could fill in the gaps. I set up my laptop in the corner of my living room, positioned so it could capture most of the apartment. I downloaded one of those motion-activated recording apps, the kind paranoid people use to catch their roommates stealing food. The first few days, nothing. I went about my routine, worked on projects, cooked meals, watched Netflix, normal life, documented in boring detail. I started to think maybe the episodes had stopped. Maybe acknowledging them had somehow broken the pattern. Then Thursday came. I woke up at 9 a.m., started the recording, made my breakfast, green smoothie, sourdough toast, the usual. I remember sitting down at my desk, opening Illustrator, starting work on a new project. Some tech startup wanted a logo that captured the essence of innovation while remaining approachable. Corporate speak for make it look expensive but friendly. The next thing I knew, I was standing in my kitchen, holding a knife. Not threateningly, just holding it. Studying it like I'd never seen one before. The clock said 12:34 p.m., 3.5 hours. Gone. My laptop was still recording. I need you to understand something. Watching yourself do things you don't remember. It's like watching a stranger wearing your skin. The way she moved, the way I moved. It was wrong. Too fluid, too purposeful. The recording showed me working normally until 9:47 a.m. Then, I just stopped, mid-keystroke, frozen. For 37 seconds, I didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even seem to breathe. Then I stood up, walked to my bookshelf, and started taking books down one by one. I arranged them on the floor in a pattern, a spiral that started tight and wound outward. Physics textbooks at the center, then philosophy, history, fiction at the edges. It took me almost an hour, moving with that same unnatural precision. When the spiral was complete, I stood in the center and closed my eyes. The audio picked up what happened next, though I wish it hadn't. I was whispering, the same phrase, over and over, in a voice that didn't sound like mine. The space between seconds. The space between seconds. The space between. For 2 hours, I stood there, whispering. Then, without warning, I opened my eyes, walked to the kitchen, picked up the knife, and that's when I woke up. The books were still on the floor when I checked. The spiral was perfect, mathematical. Each book exactly equidistant from the next. I couldn't have done that if I'd tried. Not consciously. I've never been good with spatial relationships. It's why I work in 2D design. I put the books back, deleted the recording, told myself I'd imagined the whispers. But I kept the knife in my hand for a long time, just looking at it, wondering what I'd planned to do with it. I started keeping a journal, not just of my activities but of the things I found after each episode. Evidence of a life I wasn't living. A parking ticket from downtown, dated during a blackout. For a street I'd never been to, 14 missed calls from an unknown number, all during a single 2-hour gap. A bruise on my shoulder, perfectly circular, like someone had pressed their thumb deep into the muscled dirt under my fingernails, even though I hadn't been outside. A receipt for $47.83 from a hardware store, for items I couldn't find anywhere in my apartment. The worst part wasn't the mystery. It was the feeling that came after. Like déjà vu in reverse. Not the sense that something had happened before, but that something was about to happen again, a countdown I couldn't see, ticking toward something I couldn't prevent. Marcus checked on me daily, brought groceries, tried to convince me to stay with him for a while, but I couldn't leave. I needed to understand what was happening. The doctor had run tests, blood work, brain scans. Everything came back normal. Stress-induced dissociative episodes, she said. Not uncommon in people who work from home. Isolation can do strange things to the mind. But isolation didn't explain the GPS history on my phone, showing me at places I'd never been. It didn't explain the new contact saved under the name Threshold, with a number that went straight to a disconnected line. It didn't explain why my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, had started avoiding me in the hallway, crossing herself when she thought I wasn't looking. "You came to my door," she finally told me, when I cornered her by the mailboxes. "3 nights ago, at 3 a.m., you were different. Your eyes." She shook her head, clutched her mail tighter. "You kept asking about the building's history, about who lived here before, about the sub-basement. We don't have a sub-basement. At least, I didn't think we did. I found the door by accident. It was behind the water heater in the utility closet, painted the same industrial beige as the walls. You'd never notice it unless you were looking, unless you were on your hands and knees, tracking the source of a strange draft that shouldn't exist in a windowless room. The handle was cold, colder than metal should be in a heated building. It turned easily, too easily, like it had been used recently, like it had been used often. The stairs went down. I know how that sounds. Impossible, crazy. I lived on the ground floor. Below me should have been nothing but foundation, dirt, maybe some pipes, but the stairs went down into darkness. Concrete steps that felt older than the building, older than the city itself. I should have called someone, Marcus, the police, anyone. But I knew with a certainty I couldn't explain that this was connected to my missing hours. This was where I went. This was what I did. So I descended. The air grew thicker with each step, not humid exactly, but dense, like breathing through wool. My phone's flashlight seemed to shrink, the darkness pressing in from all sides. 20 steps, 30, 40, far deeper than any basement had a right to be. The stairs ended at another door, this one metal, industrial, marked with symbols I didn't recognize. Not quite letters, not quite pictures. Something in between. My hand reached for the handle before my brain could stop it. Muscle memory from visits I couldn't recall. The room beyond was impossible. Circular, maybe 30 feet across, with walls that seemed to curve inward and outward at the same time. The floor was covered in markings, the same strange symbols from the door, arranged in concentric circles that made my eyes water to follow. In the center sat a desk, my desk, the one from my apartment. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the photos. Hundreds of them, pinned to the walls, taped to surfaces, scattered on the floor, all of me, all taken during my blackouts. Me walking down unfamiliar streets, me talking to people I didn't recognize, me standing in places that couldn't exist. In some I was smiling, but it wasn't my smile, too wide, too knowing, too hungry. On the desk was a notebook, my handwriting filling page after page. But the words, they weren't English, weren't any language I knew. They flowed and curved like living things, like thoughts given form without the filter of human understanding. I picked up the notebook, and that's when I saw it. The final entry, dated just hours ago, during a blackout I didn't remember having. She's starting to understand. The vessel grows curious about its purpose. Soon, the integration will be complete and the hours won't be lost. They'll be all that remains. I ran, up the stairs, through the utility closet, out of my apartment. I didn't stop until I was in my car, driving without destination, just needing to move, to put distance between myself and whatever that room represented. But you can't outrun something that lives inside you. At a red light on Burnside, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. For just a second, just a heartbeat. It wasn't me looking back. The features were the same, but the expression, the intelligence behind the eyes. The light turned green. I drove. I ended up at the coast, Cannon Beach, watching the sun set behind Haystack Rock. The tourists had gone home, leaving just me and the gulls and the endless rhythm of waves. I sat on a piece of driftwood, tried to make sense of what I'd found, what it meant. The notebook was still in my car. I'd grabbed it without thinking, like it was mine, like I'd written it. Maybe I had. Maybe that was the problem. My phone buzzed. Marcus. Where are you? I've been calling for hours. Hours. I checked the time. 9:17 p.m. I'd left my apartment at 2 p.m. 7 hours. But this time I remembered every minute. The drive, the sunset, the growing certainty that whatever was happening to me was accelerating. I'm at the beach, I told him. I'm coming back. We need to talk. Sarah, are you okay? You sound different. Did I? I couldn't tell anymore. Everything felt different. Shifted. Like looking at the world through a lens that was slightly out of focus. Or maybe, finally, in focus. I found something, I said, in my apartment. Marcus, I think there's something wrong with me, something really wrong. Silence on the other end. Then, I know, my blood went cold. What? I've been trying to figure out how to tell you, but you're never yourself anymore, not fully. It's like you're sharing space with something else, and it's winning. I wanted to deny it, to say he was imagining things, but the notebook in my car, the room below my apartment, the photos of a me I didn't remember being. When did it start? I asked. When did you first notice? 6 months ago, right after you moved into that apartment. 6 months, not 3 weeks. 6 months of lost hours I hadn't even known were missing. Marcus, what happens during my blackouts? What do I do? Another pause. Longer this time. You visit people, strange people. You speak in languages that shouldn't exist. You draw things, symbols, patterns. And you build. Build what? I don't know. But Sarah, I followed you once. During one of your episodes. You went to an abandoned warehouse in Southeast, met with others who moved like you do. There were dozens of them, all working on something. I couldn't get close enough to see what. The sun had fully set now, leaving only the fading purple of twilight. The ocean looked black, infinite, hungry. Why didn't you tell me? Because every time I tried, you'd have another episode, and when you came back, you'd have no memory of our conversation. It was like something was protecting itself, erasing anything that might expose it. I thought about the photos on the wall, the notebook full of impossible words, the room that shouldn't exist. What am I, Marcus? You're my friend, he said firmly. Whatever else is happening, you're still my friend, and we're going to figure this out. But even as he said it, I felt another blackout approaching. Not like before, not sudden. This time, I could feel it creeping in from the edges, like sinking into dark water. I had minutes, maybe less. Marcus, if I don't remember this conversation, then I'll tell you again, as many times as it takes. And the phone slipped from my fingers as the darkness took me. The last thing I heard was the ocean, rhythmic, eternal, counting out the space between seconds. I woke up in my apartment, not in my bed, not on my couch, but standing in the center of that impossible spiral of books. The notebook was in my hands, open to a page covered in symbols that hurt to perceive. My phone showed 3:33 a.m., the witching hour. Though I'd never believed in such things before, the apartment felt different, charged, like the air before a thunderstorm. all potential energy and waiting violence. I could hear something, a humming that wasn't quite sound, vibrating through the walls themselves. But I remembered. For the first time, I remembered what happened during a blackout. Not all of it, just fragments. Flashes of clarity in an ocean of static. Walking down stairs that went too deep. Meeting with others who wore familiar faces but moved with alien purpose. Working on something vast and impossible in the dark. And the voice, not mine, but using my mouth. Speaking to the others. Giving instructions. Sharing knowledge that human minds weren't meant to contain. The threshold weakens. The vessel accepts. Soon. I called Marcus. He answered on the first ring like he'd been waiting. You remember something? Not a question. How did you know? Because you called me. During episodes, you never call. You never reach out. Something's different. I told him about the fragments. The memories that felt like dreams of someone else's life. He listened without interrupting. Even when I described things that couldn't be real. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. We need to get you out of that apartment. I can't. The words came out before I could stop them. It won't let me. I looked down at the notebook, at the symbols that seemed to writhe on the page. I think there's something old here, older than the building, older than the city, and I think it's been using me. Using you for what? The answer came not from my memories, but from somewhere deeper. Knowledge I shouldn't have, couldn't have, but did. To build a door. Marcus was at my apartment within the hour. Despite my protests, he brought coffee, a flashlight, and a crowbar. If there's something in that room, we're going to face it together. I wanted to argue, to protect him. But the truth was I needed him there. Needed someone to witness, to remember, in case I lost myself again. We descended together. The room was different. The photos were gone, replaced by maps, street maps, building plans, geological surveys, all marked with those same flowing symbols, all centered on specific locations throughout Portland. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Jesus, Marcus breathed. Sarah, these are all residential buildings. I studied the maps, recognized some of the marked locations. My apartment building, the warehouse Marcus had mentioned, other places that felt familiar, though I'd never been to them. Not consciously. They're nodes, I said. The knowledge flowing from that alien part of my mind. Connection points. Each one weakens the boundary a little more. Boundary between what? I touched one of the maps, felt the symbols pulse beneath my fingers. Between here and where they come from, they need anchors, people like me, to maintain the connections, to prepare the way. Marcus grabbed my shoulder, turned me to face him. Who are they? What are you talking about? But I couldn't answer, because I was changing again. Not a blackout this time. Something worse. I could feel my consciousness splitting, fracturing, making room for something else. Something that had been growing inside me for 6 months, fed by every lost hour, every forgotten moment. Run, I managed to say. Marcus, run. He didn't. Even as my body began to move with that horrible precision, even as words in no human language spilled from my lips, he stayed. Grabbed me, shook me, tried to pull me back from wherever I was going, and maybe that's what saved me. The connection. The desperate humanity of a friend refusing to let go. It created a feedback loop, a contradiction the thing inside me couldn't reconcile. I was its vessel, but I was also Sarah Chen, graphic designer, tea drinker, person who once laughed so hard at a stupid meme she snorted coffee out her nose. The room began to shake. The symbols on the walls flickered, twisted, began to fade. Whatever ritual I'd been part of, Whatever door I'd been helping to build, it was collapsing. "We need to go," Marcus said. "Now." We ran, up the stairs, through my apartment, out into the Portland night. Behind us, something screamed. Not with sound, but with the absence of it. A silence so complete it made my ears ring. My apartment building shuddered. Windows cracked. Car alarms went off for blocks in every direction. But it held. Whatever had been beneath it, whatever impossible space I'd been visiting, it was gone. Collapsed, sealed. But not destroyed. I moved out the next day. Took only what I could carry. Left everything else for the landlord to deal with. Marcus helped me find a new place. A studio in Northwest, on the 3rd floor of a building built on solid bedrock. No basements, no mysterious doors, no spaces that shouldn't exist. The blackouts stopped, mostly. Sometimes, usually around 3 a.m., I still lose an hour here and there, but now I know what happens during them. I sit at my window, staring out at the city, and I count. The streetlights, the passing cars, the seconds between heartbeats, keeping watch, making sure the connections stay severed, the doors stay closed, because I can feel them out there. The others like me, still building, still preparing. The thing inside me is quieter now, wounded, but not gone. It whispers sometimes, in the space between waking and sleep, tells me about the places between places, the moments between moments, the vast hungry dark that presses against the thin shell of our reality. And the worst part? Part of me misses it. The certainty, the purpose, the feeling of being part of something larger than myself, even if that something wanted to unmake everything I knew. Marcus checks on me daily, brings me tea, sits with me through the difficult nights, reminds me who I am when I start to forget. He's researching, finding others who've experienced similar things, building a network of watchers, people who've been touched by whatever lurks in those impossible spaces and survived. We compare notes, share strategies, try to map the pattern of incidents, predict where the next attempts might occur. It's not much, but it's something. A way to fight back against things that shouldn't exist, but late at night, when I'm alone with my thoughts, I wonder if we're fighting the inevitable. If those lost hours were just the beginning. If somewhere, in a room that exists outside normal space, another version of me is still building that door, still counting the space between seconds, still waiting. If you're still listening, if you made it this far, check the time again. Compare it to when you started. Does it match what you expected? Or are there minutes you can't account for? Little gaps where your attention wandered, where something else might have slipped in. Leave a comment. Tell me if you've experienced anything similar, lost time, impossible spaces, the feeling that something is using you for purposes you can't understand. Because I don't think Portland is special. I think these things are everywhere. In every city, every building with a history. Every place where reality wears thin. And I think they're getting stronger. The next time you have a blackout, a moment where you can't quite remember what you were doing, pay attention. Look for the signs. Check your phone, your receipts, your browser history. You might be surprised what you find. And if you ever come across a door that shouldn't exist, a stairway that goes too deep, a room that defies geometry, don't go in, don't investigate, don't try to understand. Some thresholds aren't meant to be crossed. Some hours are better off lost. But then again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's all in my head. Stress and isolation playing tricks on a tired mind. Maybe the room never existed. The photos were dreams, and the whispers just the wind. Maybe. Or maybe you're losing hours too, and you just haven't noticed yet. Sweet dreams. Story number 2. Listen. I need to tell you something before I lose my mind completely. before the seasons take me too. My name is Sarah Chen, and 3 weeks ago I inherited my grandmother's Victorian house in Burlington, Vermont. What I discovered there has been eating away at my sanity ever since. And the worst part, I think it's already too late for me. But maybe, just maybe, if you're listening to this, you can figure out what I couldn't. Why the windows in that house don't show what they should. Why each one opens to a different season. And why something is moving between them. Comment below if you've ever experienced something you couldn't explain. Because I need to know I'm not alone in this. Now, let me tell you how it all began. The key felt heavier than it should have when Attorney Morrison handed it to me. Bronze, ornate, with symbols I didn't recognize carved into the bow. My grandmother's house key. Though, I'd never actually been inside the place. Your grandmother was particular about visitors, Morrison said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. His fingers trembled slightly as he pushed the paperwork across his mahogany desk. She left very specific instructions. The house is yours, but... He paused, cleared his throat. But what? I leaned forward, the leather chair creaking beneath me. She insisted you must live there for at least 30 days before you can sell. And Sarah. He looked directly at me then, and I swear I saw fear flicker in his eyes. She said to pay attention to the windows. All of them. I laughed. Nervous energy, really. The windows? What about them? Morrison just shook his head and handed me the deed. The drive from Boston took 4 hours. 4 hours of autumn foliage blurring past my Honda Civic. Leaves painting the Vermont highways in rust and gold. October in New England, there's nothing quite like it. The air grows sharp with possibility, carrying the scent of wood smoke and apple cider. I'd barely known Grandma Chen. My mother had fallen out with her years before I was born. Something about the house, actually. Mom would never talk about it. Just pressed her lips together whenever I asked, the way she did when Dad left. The Victorian sat on Elm Street, tucked between 2 modern colonials that made it look even more out of place. 3 stories of weathered purple paint and green trim, gingerbread details crumbling at the edges. A wraparound porch sagged slightly, and the windows. God, there were so many windows. More than any house needed. They dotted the facade irregularly, different sizes and shapes, some with stained glass borders, others plain. As I pulled into the driveway, late afternoon sun glinted off the glass, and for a moment, just a moment, I could have sworn I saw snow falling in one of the upper windows. But that was impossible. The day was crisp but clear, not a cloud in the October sky. The front door groaned as I pushed it open, and the smell hit me immediately. Not unpleasant, just complex. Like several rooms existing at once. Pine needles and summer grass, autumn leaves, and... Was that spring rain? The entrance hall stretched before me, dark wood floors covered in a thin layer of dust. To my left, a staircase curved up into shadow. To my right, a doorway opened into what looked like a living room. And everywhere there were windows. I set my duffel bag down and walked to the nearest one in the front hall. Through it, I could see the street clearly. Elm Street in all its October glory. Normal. I released a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Okay, Sarah, I muttered to myself. It's just a creepy old house. You've seen horror movies. You know the drill. Don't go in the basement, don't read from any weird books, and definitely don't. I'd walked into the living room as I talked, and the words died in my throat. The window on the east wall showed summer. Not October. Summer. Bright July sunshine poured through the glass, illuminating dust motes that danced in the golden light. Through that window, the maple tree in the side yard bore full green leaves. The grass grew lush and long. A sprinkler ran in the neighbor's yard. The neighbor whose house through the front window sat surrounded by fallen leaves. I approached slowly, my reflection wavering in the glass. When I touched the pane, it felt warm, summer warm, the kind of heat that builds up in glass after hours of sunshine. What the hell? I ran to the front window. October. Brown leaves, gray sky beginning to darken toward evening. I ran back to the east window. Summer. Blazing noon sunshine, green everything. My phone. I needed to call someone, anyone. I pulled it out, but the screen showed no signal. Of course, I'd have to find the router, get the Wi-Fi password. A sound from upstairs made me freeze. Footsteps. No, more like branches scraping against wood. I grabbed a poker from beside the fireplace, dusty but solid, and crept toward the stairs. "Hello?" My voice cracked. "Is someone there?" The sound stopped. I climbed slowly, testing each step for creaks. The second-floor hallway ran the length of the house, doors on either side, and at the far end, a window. Through that window, snow fell in thick, lazy flakes. My hand tightened on the poker. This wasn't possible, some kind of projection maybe, special glass. But even as I thought it, I knew better. The snow looked real. It accumulated on the windowsill, each flake distinct and perfect. I approached the window like it might attack me. Outside, or through it, or whatever. I saw the same view as downstairs. The street, the houses, but buried under 2 feet of snow. Christmas lights twinkled on the neighbor's porch. A snowman stood in their front yard, carrot nose tilted at a jaunty angle. When I looked back down the hallway, each door had a small window in it. And through each one, spring rain in the first. Cherry blossoms blooming impossible pink against the door's dark wood. Summer heat shimmering in the second. Autumn fog in the third. Winter darkness in the fourth. My grandmother had lived here. For 40 years, she'd lived here with windows that showed wrong seasons. How? Why? The scraping sound came again, definitely from behind the winter door. I raised the poker, reached for the handle. The door swung open before I could touch it. The room exhaled winter at me. A blast of Arctic air that made my teeth chatter. Ice crystals formed on my eyelashes as I peered inside. It was a bedroom, or had been. Now frost covered every surface, turning furniture into glittering white sculptures. The window, larger than the others, dominated the far wall. Through it, a blizzard raged. Not the gentle snowfall I'd seen from the hallway, but a full whiteout. Wind howled, though I couldn't hear it. The glass stood between me and that fury, silent as a movie screen. Something moved in the storm. Just a shadow at first, barely visible through the driving snow. Then closer. A figure, walking toward the window from the outside. Walking through the blizzard as if taking a casual stroll. I stumbled backward, the poker clattering from numb fingers. The figure kept coming. Tall, thin, moving with an odd, jerky gait, like a marionette with half its strings cut. It reached the window and knocked 3 times. Deliberate, patient, I ran, down the hall, down the stairs, grabbing my bag as I sprinted for the door. 30 days, Morrison had said. 30 days before I could sell. To hell with that. I'd sleep in my car, get a hotel, anything but. The front door wouldn't open. I turned the deadbolt, pulled the handle, threw my shoulder against the wood. Nothing. The door felt solid as a wall. The windows. I ran to the living room, picked up a chair. It bounced off the summer window like it was made of rubber. My phone still showed no signal. The landline, when I found it in the kitchen, gave only a strange humming sound. Not a dial tone, almost like breathing. I was trapped. The kitchen windows showed spring. Rain pattering against the glass, the garden outside blooming with flowers that shouldn't exist in October, or December, or July, or whenever the hell each window thought it was. I spent that first night huddled on the living room couch, wrapped in a dusty afghan that smelled like lavender and something else, something metallic. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that figure in the blizzard. heard that patient knocking. Knock, knock, knock. By morning, or what I assumed was morning, since my phone had died and the windows all showed different times of day, I developed a theory maybe Grandma Chen had been some kind of artist. Special glass that projected different scenes. High-tech stuff made to look like windows. It didn't explain the temperature changes or the locked doors, but it was something rational to cling to. I decided to explore properly, map the house, figure out its tricks. If I was stuck here, I might as well understand what I was dealing with. The first floor had 8 windows total. 2 showing autumn, the real season, I assumed. 3 showing summer, 2 spring, 1 winter. The kitchen had a door to the backyard, but it wouldn't budge either. Through its window, rain fell on a garden bursting with impossible life. The second floor was worse. 12 rooms, each with at least 1 window, and the seasons made no sense. A bathroom window showed summer, while the bedroom next door opened onto winter. One room, a study lined with books, had 4 windows showing 4 different seasons. Sitting in the center felt like being at the axis of a temporal compass, but the third floor, I found the narrow staircase behind what I thought was a closet door. It spiraled up, the walls pressing close. At the top, a single door. No window in this one. Just smooth wood with symbols carved into the surface. The same symbols from the house key. I touched the door and jerked my hand back. It was warm, then cold, then warm again. Like it couldn't decide which season it belonged to. Behind that door, something moved. Not footsteps, more like blowing. Water, maybe, or sand, or snow. I backed away, decided to save that room for later, or never. In Grandma's bedroom, second floor, showing autumn like it should, I found her journals. Dozens of them, dating back 40 years. I opened one at random. May 15th, 1995. The spring window in the guest room has started showing summer. It's confused, shifting between seasons like it can't remember which one it's supposed to hold. I've tried covering it, boarding it up. Nothing works. The seasons bleed through. Another entry, December 3rd, 2001. I saw him again today, the winter walker. He comes when the snows are thickest, knocking at the windows that show his season. He wants in. They all want in. The summer lady with her burning eyes. The spring child who cries rain. The autumn harvester with his basket of rotting leaves. But I know the secret now. They can only enter through their own season. As long as I keep the windows mixed, as long as no room shows only one season, they can't fully manifest. The window installer thought I was insane, but he did the work. Scattered the seasons throughout the house. My prison and my protection. My hands shook as I set the journal down. Grandma hadn't been crazy, or if she had, her delusions had somehow become real, because I'd seen the winter walker. He'd knocked for me too. I spent the rest of that day reading, piecing together her system. She'd discovered the house's condition shortly after moving in. The windows had shown their proper season at first. Then, slowly, they'd begun to change. Show other times, other whens. And with the changing seasons came the visitors. They lived in the spaces between seasons, Grandma wrote. In the moments where winter became spring, where summer faded to fall. Transition spirits, hungry for stable time. They pressed against the windows of their respective seasons, seeking entry, seeking warmth or cold or rain or death. The mixed windows confused them, kept them at bay, but Grandma had been fighting a losing battle. The house wanted to sort itself, wanted each room to settle into a single season, and when that happened, a sound from upstairs. That scraping again, but now I recognized it. Fingernails on glass, coming from the winter bedroom. Knock, knock, knock. By the 4th day, I'd established routines. Check each window in the morning, noting any changes. The seasons had started to shift, just as Grandma's journals predicted. The living room's summer window flickered occasionally, showing brief glimpses of autumn. The kitchen spring windows held steady, but I caught them displaying summer rain instead of spring showers. I'd also identified the visitors. The winter walker came at night, always. Tall, thin, leaving no footprints in his endless snow. He favored the second-floor bedroom but sometimes appeared at other winter windows. His knocking was patient, methodical. He had all the time in the world. The summer lady appeared at noon when the sun blazed highest in her windows. She was beautiful in the way forest fires are beautiful, consuming, terrible, impossible to look away from. Her dress flickered between yellow silk and actual flames. She pressed her palms against the glass, leaving handprints that glowed with heat. The spring child broke my heart. No more than 6 or 7, wearing a raincoat that dripped constantly. They cried against the windows, tears mixing with the eternal rain of their season. Sometimes they drew pictures in the condensation. Houses with too many windows, stick figures trapped inside. The autumn harvester was the worst. He looked almost normal, an older man with a wicker basket, collecting leaves. Until you noticed the leaves were the wrong color. Not brown or gold, but gray, withered things that had never been alive. He'd hold them up to the window, offering them like gifts. His smile never reached his eyes. I tried everything to get out. Broke furniture against the windows. Attempted to dismantle the doors board by board. Even tried climbing out through the chimney, which narrowed impossibly after the first few feet, forcing me back down. The phone had started working on day 3, but everyone I called heard only static. I could hear them. Mom crying, asking where I was, my ex-boyfriend threatening to call the police. Attorney Morrison's voice, strangely unsurprised, saying, "The 30 days will pass quickly, Sarah. Your grandmother managed 40 years. But I wasn't my grandmother. I was 28 years old, a marketing manager from Boston who liked sushi and Netflix and normal windows that showed one goddamn season. I wasn't equipped for this. By day 7, the sorting had accelerated. I woke to find the living room showing only summer. All 3 windows blazed with July heat, and the summer lady stood at each one simultaneously. She'd multiplied, or maybe she'd always been 3. They moved in perfect synchronization, hands pressed to glass, mouths forming words I couldn't hear but felt in my bones. "Let us in, Sarah. We'll make it always summer, always warm, always burning." I dragged blankets and pillows to the kitchen, the last room still showing mixed seasons. 2 spring, 1 summer. The spring child had noticed, spending hours at the spring windows, drawing increasingly frantic pictures. Houses turning into prisons. Stick figures becoming smaller and smaller until they were just dots. Then nothing. Grandma's final journals were the worst. Her handwriting deteriorated as the years passed, becoming spidery and strange. The last entries were barely legible. October 31st, 2022. The 3rd floor calls to me. Behind that door is the heart of it, the place where all seasons meet and cancel each other out. I've resisted for so long, but I'm tired. So tired. The house wins in the end. It always wins. It will sort itself despite our efforts. And when it does, when each room holds its proper season, they'll all come through at once. I should have warned someone, should have burned it down, but it wouldn't let me. The house needs a caretaker, someone to witness the seasons. Someone to... The entry stopped mid-sentence. I found other things in her papers. Research about the house's history. Built in 1892 by a man named Cornelius Webb, who'd claimed he could capture time in glass. He'd installed special windows that could hold seasons like photographs. But something had gone wrong. The windows didn't just hold seasons. They opened to them. Created doorways to the spaces between times. Webb had disappeared one winter, leaving only a note. "The seasons have taken me to their court. I go willingly." Every owner since had suffered similar fates. Disappearances in winter. bodies found burned in summer, drownings in dry houses during spring, accelerated aging in autumn, bodies crumbling like leaves. Only Grandma had lasted. 40 years of fighting, of maintaining the delicate balance. And now it was my turn. Knock, knock, knock. The winter walker had moved to the kitchen window. The summer one. But as I watched, frost spread across the glass. The season was changing, sorting. By day 10, only 2 rooms remained mixed. The kitchen, and surprisingly the third-floor room I hadn't dared enter. Everything else had settled. The living room blazed with eternal summer. The study drowned in spring rain. Bedrooms froze in winter stillness. The hallway faded through infinite autumns, and the visitors grew bolder. They'd started working together. The summer lady melted frost from winter windows. The spring child's tears doused summer flames. The autumn harvester gathered the ashes, adding them to his terrible collection. The winter walker froze spring rain into weapons of ice. They were breaking down the barriers between their seasons, creating cracks in the glass. Soon, they wouldn't need the windows to align. They'd force their way through regardless. I made my stand in the kitchen, pushed the refrigerator against the spring window where the child cried, stacked chairs against the summer window where seasons battled for dominance. But I knew it was temporary. The house was stronger than me, the seasons more patient. On day 12, I heard the third-floor door open. The sound of that door opening, like every season breathing at once. Winter wind and summer sighs, spring rain and autumn whispers, all tangled together in a symphony of temporal chaos. I stood at the bottom of the narrow staircase, poker in hand once again, staring up into swirling darkness. "Sarah." The voice came from above. Familiar but wrong. Like hearing your own voice on a recording but stretched across decades. "Sarah, come up. I've been waiting." Grandma Chen. But she was dead. Had been dead for 3 weeks. I climbed. Each step felt like crossing between seasons. Cold to hot to wet to dry. My breath misted, then came in gasps, then tasted of rain, then crackled with autumn leaves. At the top, the door stood open. The room beyond defied understanding. It was all seasons and no season. Snow fell upward while rain fell down. Leaves grew and died on the same branch. Flowers bloomed from ice. At the center sat Grandma Chen, looking exactly as she had in the photos. Not the 90-year-old woman who'd died, but the 50-year-old who'd first moved into this house. "Time doesn't work right here," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her. "It was made of ice and fire, wood and water. This is the heart where Webb did his experiments, where he broke through. I stayed in the doorway. You're not real. Real is relative in this room." She smiled, and her face flickered. "Young, old, older, ancient, young again. I've been here since I died, or maybe I've always been here. Time doesn't work right here. Yeah, I got that." I gripped the poker tighter. "How do I get out?" "You don't." Her smile turned sad. "The house needs a caretaker. Someone to witness the seasons, to keep the visitors at bay. When one caretaker dies, another is chosen. Always family. Always someone with just enough connection to come, but not enough to know better. That's insane. Is it?" She gestured to the impossible room. "You've seen them. The winter walker, the summer lady. They're not evil, Sarah. They're just hungry. Hungry for stable time. For a single season that doesn't shift or change. This house is a beacon to them. A promise of permanence." Through the room's windows, and there were dozens, all showing different seasons in the same view. I could see them, all of them. The visitors pressed against the glass like moths to flame. But here, in this room where all seasons existed simultaneously, they couldn't enter. Couldn't choose which window was theirs. "Webb thought he was so clever," Grandma continued. "Capturing seasons in glass. But he captured more than that. He created a wound in time, a place where the boundaries thinned, and things that live in those boundaries. Want in, I finished. The house will sort itself eventually. It always does. Room by room, window by window, until each space holds a single season. And then they'll come through. All of them. And they'll spread. I thought of the summer lady's burning dress, the winter walker's endless storm, the spring child's drowning tears, the autumn harvester's death-touched collection, all of them loosed on the world. So what do I do? Grandma leaned forward, and for a moment she was solid. Real. My actual grandmother, not this temporal echo. You maintain the balance, mix the seasons, confuse the windows. It's not a perfect solution, but it holds them back. Gives the world another generation of safety. For 40 years, until I die and some other poor relative gets trapped? Or, she glanced at the windows, you could end it. My heart stopped. How? This room is the heart. Break the windows here and the whole system collapses. The seasons snap back to normal. The house becomes just a house. She paused. But all the built-up temporal energy has to go somewhere. Everyone who's ever been caretaker, Webb, the others, me, we're all still here, caught between seasons. Breaking the windows means releasing us into, well, we don't know what. But the visitors would lose their doorways. They'd fade back to the spaces between seasons where they belong. I looked at the poker in my hand, at the dozens of windows surrounding us, at my grandmother flickering between ages like a TV with bad reception. Why didn't you do it? Fear, she admitted. Fear of what comes after. Fear of truly dying. Fear that I was wrong and breaking the windows would make things worse. She smiled sadly. But you're stronger than me, Sarah. You always were. Your mother knew it. That's why she kept you away. The visitors had noticed our conversation. They pressed harder against the glass, creating spiderweb cracks. The winter walker had frost spreading from his window. The summer lady's glass glowed cherry red. Time was running out. I stood, poker raised. Will it hurt? Everything hurts, dear one. The question is whether the pain means something. I swung. The first window exploded in a shower of all seasons. Glass that was ice and fire and rain and dust. The room convulsed, reality bending. Through the broken window I saw not the outside, but the between. An endless corridor of moments, each one a different season, stretching to infinity. The visitors screamed, or maybe sang. The sound was beyond human comprehension. I swung again, another window gone, another glimpse of the between. And in that space I saw them, the previous caretakers. Webb with his mad eyes, a woman in a 1920s dress, a man from the 60s, others, all trapped between heartbeats, between seasons. Keep going, Grandma shouted over the rising chaos. She was fading, becoming translucent. Free us all. Window by window, I destroyed the heart of the house. Each break released more temporal energy, set more souls free. The visitors retreated, their forms becoming less solid. The winter walker's storm died. The summer lady's flames extinguished. The spring child stopped crying. The autumn harvester dropped his basket, leaves scattering into nothing. The last window was the hardest. It showed all seasons at once, a perfect prism of time. Through it, I could see everything, past and future. What was and what could be. The price of breaking it. Sarah, Grandma said, barely a whisper now, thank you. I closed my eyes and swung. The explosion knocked me backward. Glass and time and seasons shattered around me. The room collapsed, expanded, collapsed again. I fell through spring rain and summer heat, autumn wind and winter cold. I fell through 40 years of Grandma's vigil, through Webb's mad experiments, through the birth and death of the house's curse. I woke in the kitchen. Morning sunlight, October sunlight, streamed through normal windows showing normal autumn. The house felt different, lighter, just wood and glass and memory. My phone buzzed. 17 missed calls. 3 days of messages. But I'd been in the house for 2 weeks, hadn't I? Time doesn't work right here, not anymore, not ever again. I walked through the house one more time. Every window showed October. Beautiful, normal October. The visitors were gone. The seasons had sorted themselves back to reality, but sometimes, just sometimes. I catch a glimpse in the glass, a shadow in the frost, a figure in the rain. They're still out there in the spaces between seasons, waiting, watching, hoping someone else will build windows they can crawl through. I sold the house. Attorney Morrison didn't seem surprised. Your grandmother would be proud, he said, producing papers I signed without reading. The new owners seem happy. They post photos on Instagram. #Victorian Dream #Historic Home #Burlington Beauty. They don't notice the small things, the way frost sometimes forms on the inside of windows in July, the sound of rain when the sky is clear, the leaves that fall in spring. They definitely don't notice the figure I saw in their latest post, standing in the background, barely visible through the living room window, tall, thin, patient. He's found another way in. They always do. The windows in my apartment all face east. They show only sunrise, only morning, only the beginning of days. I chose it that way. One direction. One time, no variations. But last week I woke to find snow falling outside my bedroom window. In July. The glass was cold under my fingers. And in the distance, through the swirling white, I saw him. The winter walker. Not knocking this time, just watching, waiting. Because the thing about breaking cycles, sometimes they don't stay broken. Sometimes they just find new shapes, new windows, new ways in. I'm uploading this story because I need to know, has anyone else seen them? The figures in the wrong seasons? The windows that show impossible weather? The doors that won't open when they should? Comment below. Share your experiences. Subscribe if you want to hear what happens next. Because this isn't over. The seasons are still hungry. And I know, they're getting closer. Last night I heard it again. Patient, rhythmic, inevitable. Knock, knock, knock. Story number 3. They say some bridges connect more than just 2 pieces of land. Some bridges connect worlds that should never meet. And I'm about to tell you why I'll never cross another bridge at night, especially not the one locals call the Goatman's Bridge. But before I share what happened that October night in Denton County, Texas, I need you to do something for me. Turn off your lights. Get comfortable under your blanket, and whatever you do, don't look out your window when you hear the tapping, because once you know the truth about what lives beneath that bridge, you'll start seeing the signs everywhere. If you're brave enough to hear this story, hit that subscribe button now. Trust me, you'll want to discuss this with others when it's over. You'll need to. The story begins now. My name is Sarah Chen, and I used to be a skeptic. Used to be. 3 weeks ago, I was just another freelance journalist scraping by in Dallas, writing fluff pieces about local food trucks and weekend farmers markets. Then my editor at Texas Monthly called with an assignment that would change everything. "Sarah, I need you to cover the Old Alton Bridge for our Halloween issue," Marcus said, his voice crackling through my phone. "You know, the one they call the Goatman's Bridge?" I rolled my eyes, even though he couldn't see me. "The one in Denton County? Come on, Marcus, that's just an old urban legend. That's exactly why I want you on it. Debunk it. Give our readers the real history, the actual facts behind the myth." He paused. "Besides, the bridge just reopened after renovations. Perfect timing." I should have said no, looking back. God, I should have said no, but the pay was good, and I needed the money. My laptop was dying, rent was due, and instant ramen had become my primary food group. So I said yes. The old Alton Bridge sits about 40 minutes north of Dallas, spanning Hickory Creek between the cities of Denton and Copper Canyon. Built in 1884, it's this old iron truss bridge that cars haven't used since 2001. Now, it's just for pedestrians and cyclists, though most locals avoid it after dark. I spent the first few days doing research from my apartment. The legend was pretty standard small-town folklore stuff. Oscar Washburn, known as the Goat Man, was a black goat farmer who lived near the bridge in the 1930s. He was successful, too successful for some people's liking. Put up a sign that said, "This way to the Goat Man," to advertise his business. The story goes that local clansmen didn't appreciate his success. One night in 1938, they kidnapped him, put a noose around his neck, and threw him off the bridge. But when they looked over the side, the noose was empty, no body. Oscar had vanished. They went to his house, found his family gone too, never seen again. Since then, people claim to see glowing eyes under the bridge, hear hoofbeats on the wooden planks. Some say if you cross the bridge at night without headlights, the Goat Man appears in your rearview mirror. Typical ghost story stuff, right? That's what I thought. I scheduled interviews with locals for Thursday afternoon. The plan was simple: talk to some old-timers, get the real history, maybe take some photos of the bridge and write a nice debunking piece. Easy money. But Wednesday night, something happened that should have been my first warning. I was organizing my notes at my kitchen table. Laptop open to a Word document titled Goatman Bridge, Interview Questions. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of my ancient refrigerator and the occasional car passing on the street below. Then I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. 3 deliberate knocks on my window. I lived on the 3rd floor. My blood went cold, but I forced myself to rationalize. Probably a bird, maybe a branch from the oak tree outside, even though there was no wind. I got up slowly, walked to the window. The streetlight outside cast everything in that sick orange glow. Nothing there, just my reflection staring back, pale and wide-eyed. I was about to turn away when I saw it. In the reflection, behind me, 2 points of light, like eyes, glowing faintly. I spun around. Nothing. Just my messy apartment, exactly as it had been. When I looked back at the window, there was a handprint on the outside of the glass. 5 fingers splayed wide, but the fingers were too long. And in the center of the palm, pressed into the condensation, was the print of what looked like a hoof. I didn't sleep that night. Told myself it was my imagination. Stress from the deadline. But deep down, some primal part of my brain was screaming warnings. I should have listened. Thursday afternoon came too quickly. I drove out to Denton County in my beat-up Honda Civic, windows down because the AC had died last summer. The Texas heat was unseasonable for October, making everything feel heavy and oppressive. My first stop was the Denton County Historical Museum. The curator, Mrs. Eleanor Vance, was exactly what you'd expect. Silver-haired, wearing a cardigan despite the heat, and thrilled to have someone interested in local history. "Oh, the old Alton Bridge," she said, adjusting her glasses. "Such a fascinating piece of our heritage. Though I must say, most people who come asking about it are more interested in the sensational aspects." "That's actually why I'm here," I said, pulling out my recorder. "I want to separate fact from fiction. What's the real story?" She smiled, but something flickered in her eyes. "The real story? Well, the bridge was built in 1884 by the King Iron Bridge Manufacturing Company. It was a vital connection for the community, especially for farmers bringing their goods to market." "And Oscar Washburn?" Her smile faltered slightly. "Yes, Oscar Washburn was indeed a real person. A goat farmer, very successful, from what our records show. He did disappear in 1938, along with his family. But the rest, the Klan, the hanging. That's just legend, right? Mrs. Vance was quiet for a long moment. She got up, walked to a filing cabinet, and pulled out an old folder. "We don't typically show these to journalists," she said quietly, "but since you want the truth..." She handed me a photocopy of an old newspaper clipping. The Denton Record Chronicle, dated August 1938. The headline made my stomach drop. "Local farmer and family vanish, foul play suspected." But it was the photo that made my hands shake. A fuzzy black and white image of the bridge, and hanging from it, an empty noose. The caption read, "Strange scene discovered at Old Alton Bridge. No body found." "This is real?" I whispered. "As real as it gets," Mrs. Vance said. "The official record says the family disappeared. No bodies were ever found. But Sarah..." She leaned in closer, and I smelled lavender and something else. Something like sulfur. "Some stories are better left untold. Some bridges are better left uncrossed." I thanked her and left, but her words echoed in my head. The afternoon was wearing on, and I had more interviews scheduled. But first, I needed to see the bridge myself. The drive out to Old Alton Bridge took me through suburban sprawl that gradually gave way to more rural areas. Trees pressed in on both sides of the road, creating a tunnel of green that felt oddly claustrophobic despite the bright afternoon sun. I parked in the small lot near the bridge entrance. There were a few other cars, cyclists loading up their bikes, a couple taking selfies. Normal afternoon stuff. The bridge itself was underwhelming in daylight. Red iron trusses spanning maybe 150 feet across Hickory Creek below. The wooden planks had been recently replaced, fresh and yellow-brown. I walked out onto the bridge, my footsteps echoing hollowly. Halfway across, I stopped and looked over the railing. The creek was maybe 20 feet below, running low from the lack of rain. Trees pressed in on both banks, creating deep shadows even in the afternoon light. That's when I noticed it. Carved into one of the wooden planks near my feet. Fresh grooves in the new wood. He watches from below. A chill ran up my spine despite the heat. I took a photo, then another of the bridge from different angles. Everything looked normal through my camera lens. Just an old bridge on a Thursday afternoon. But as I was leaving, an elderly man sitting on a bench near the parking lot called out to me. "You're that journalist, aren't you? The one asking about Oscar?" I walked over. He was probably in his 80s, wearing overalls and a John Deere cap. His eyes were milky with cataracts, but they seemed to see right through me. "I'm Carl Hensley," he said, not offering his hand. "My grandfather knew Oscar, knew what really happened to him." I sat down beside him, pulled out my recorder. I'd love to hear about it. He was quiet for so long I thought he might have fallen asleep. Then, Oscar wasn't just a goat farmer. He was what my grandmother called touched. Could do things, know things. The goats were just how he made his living, but people came to him for other reasons. What kind of reasons? Help finding lost things. Knowing when the rains would come, sometimes. He lowered his voice. Sometimes to speak to those who'd passed on. I tried to keep my expression neutral, professional. "And you believe he had these abilities?" Carl turned those milky eyes on me. "I don't believe nothing, I know. I was 10 years old when Oscar disappeared, week before it happened. He came to our farm, told my grandfather to keep his family inside on the new moon. Said something was coming, something angry. What happened? We did what he said, locked ourselves in tight. That night," he shuddered, "that night we heard things. Hoofbeats on the roof, scratching at the doors. Something calling our names in Oscar's voice, but wrong, like an echo of an echo." My rational mind wanted to dismiss this as an old man's imagination. Childhood memories twisted by time, but the handprint on my window, the fresh carving on the bridge. Next morning, Carl continued, we found every door and window marked, hoof prints and handprints, pressed into the wood like they'd been burned there. Week later, Oscar was gone. You think whatever came for your family that night came back for him? Carl stood up slowly, joints creaking. I don't think, girl, I know. Oscar didn't disappear. He became something else. Something that watches from below the bridge, waiting. Waiting for what? He started walking away, then paused. For someone stupid enough to cross at the wrong time. Someone who doesn't understand that some bridges, they're not just bridges, they're doorways. And once you open a door, he looked back at me. Sometimes you can't close it again. I sat there for a while after he left, watching the shadows grow longer. The cyclists were gone. The couple had driven away. It was just me and the bridge and the sound of water running below. I should have left then. Should have driven back to Dallas, written some bland historical piece and forgotten the whole thing. But I'd come this far. I had more interviews that evening, including one with a local paranormal investigator who claimed to have evidence of activity at the bridge. So I stayed. God help me. I stayed. By 6 p.m., I was sitting in a Denton coffee shop called Common Grounds, nursing my third cappuccino and trying to make sense of my notes. The rational part of my brain, the journalist part, kept trying to organize everything into a neat narrative. Historical tragedy plus local superstition equals urban legend. Simple, but the handprint on my window, Carl's story, even Mrs. Vance's warning, they sat like stones in my stomach. My phone buzzed. Text from someone named Jake Morrison. I'm here, corner booth by the window. Jake was the paranormal investigator I'd contacted through a local Facebook group. I'd expected someone older, maybe wearing all black with too many skull accessories. Instead, I found a guy about my age in jeans and a University of North Texas t-shirt, laptop open in front of him. Sarah? He half stood as I approached. Thanks for meeting me. I know this stuff probably seems crazy to a journalist. I sat down, pulled out my recorder. Actually, I'm trying to keep an open mind. Tell me about your experiences at the bridge. Jake's whole demeanor changed, became more serious. I've been investigating the old Alton Bridge for 3 years. Started as a college project, turned into an obsession. He spun his laptop around. This is from last month. The screen showed a night vision video. The green-tinted image was clearly the bridge. Empty and still, then movement under the bridge. A shadow that didn't match the trees. 2 points of light that could have been eyes. Digital artifact, I suggested, though my voice sounded uncertain even to me. That's what I thought at first. He clicked to another file. This is audio from the same night. He handed me earbuds. I put them in, heard nothing at first but wind and crickets. Then, footsteps on wood, heavy, rhythmic, but wrong somehow, like the pattern was off. Not quite human. Then breathing. Deep, rattling. And so close it sounded like it was right next to the recorder. I pulled out the earbuds, my hands shaking slightly. Could be anyone, teenagers playing pranks. At 3 a.m. on a Tuesday? Jake shook his head. But here's the thing that really got me. He pulled up another file, this one a spreadsheet. I started tracking disappearances in the area, not just recent, going back decades. The list was extensive. Names, dates, last known locations. A pattern emerged. They all visited the bridge, I said quietly. Within 72 hours of disappearing, Jake confirmed. Not all of them, but enough to be statistically significant, and look at the dates. I scanned the columns. They're all around the new moon. Every single one. And guess what tomorrow night is? My coffee suddenly tasted like ash. New moon. Jake leaned forward. I'm going out there tonight. Last night, before the new moon, I want to set up equipment, get baseline readings. You could come with. See for yourself what's really out there." Every instinct screamed no, but the journalist in me, the part that needed to know the truth, was louder. "What time?" "Midnight. I know it sounds cliché, but that's when activity peaks." He must have seen my hesitation. "Look, I get it. This is weird, but you're writing about the bridge anyway. Wouldn't you rather have first-hand experience?" He was right. I hated that he was right. We exchanged numbers. Agreed to meet at the parking lot at 11:45. I had 5 hours to kill, and one more interview scheduled. This one was different. Maria Washburn lived in a small house on the outskirts of Denton. When she'd responded to my Facebook query about the Goatman's Bridge, she'd simply said, "I'm Oscar's great-great-granddaughter. We need to talk." The house was tidy but worn, like it was holding itself together through sheer will. Maria answered the door before I could knock. She was maybe 50, with eyes that seemed older. "You're the journalist," she said. It wasn't a question. "Come in, we don't have much time." The inside smelled of sage and something else, earthy and old. She led me to a living room where every surface was covered with family photos. Black and white images of people I didn't recognize, except for one. A tall man with kind eyes standing next to a pen full of goats. "That's Oscar," Maria said, following my gaze. "My great-great-grandfather." I sat on a worn couch, recorder in hand. "What can you tell me about him?" Maria poured tea from a pot I hadn't noticed her carrying. The liquid was dark, almost black, and smelled of herbs I couldn't identify. "First, drink this. I'm not really thirsty. It's not about thirst, it's about protection. You've been marked, haven't you? He's already noticed you looking into his story." The handprint on my window, my hand trembled as I took the cup. "How did you?" "The same way Oscar knew things. It runs in the family, though most of us try to ignore it." She sipped her own tea. "But ignoring a gift doesn't make it go away, just makes you vulnerable when things like this happen." The tea was bitter, made my tongue tingle, but almost immediately the constant anxiety I'd been carrying seemed to lessen. "Oscar wasn't killed by the clan," Maria said quietly. "That's the story we let people believe because the truth is harder." "What's the truth?" She got up, walked to an old chest in the corner. From it, she pulled out a leather-bound journal. Oscar kept records of his work, his real work. She handed it to me. "He was what you might call a guardian. The bridge, it's old. Older than the iron structure there now. Indigenous peoples knew about that spot, knew it was a thin place. Thin place, where the boundary between worlds is permeable. Things can cross over, usually small things, lost spirits, echoes. But sometimes," she sat back down, "sometimes something hungry finds the crack." I opened the journal. The pages were filled with tight handwriting, drawings of symbols I didn't recognize, and dates. So many dates. "Oscar kept it sealed," Maria continued. "Used the goats as a cover. But really, he was there to watch, to maintain the barriers. But in 1938, something went wrong." I found the entry, August 1938. The handwriting was different here, more frantic. It's growing stronger. The offerings aren't enough anymore. It wants more than blood, it wants passage. I can feel it pressing against the boundaries. If I can't hold it... The entry cut off. What happened? Maria's eyes were distant. Oscar did the only thing he could. He made a bargain. His soul for the seal. He became the guardian permanently, not alive, not dead. Something in between, bound to the bridge. "You're saying Oscar is what? A ghost?" "No," her voice was firm. "He is the bridge now, the guardian and the guarded, the seal and the sealed, but..." She looked at me directly. "The seal weakens during the new moon. That's when the hungry thing presses hardest against the boundaries. That's when Oscar has to fight to keep it contained. And if he fails?" Maria didn't answer, which was answer enough. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're going to the bridge tonight. I can see it in your future like smoke on water. And you need to understand, when you cross that bridge during the new moon, you're not just walking on wood and iron, you're walking on Oscar himself, and the thing below, it will notice." She stood up, went to a drawer, and pulled out a small leather pouch on a cord. "Wear this. It won't protect you completely, but it might give you a chance." I took the pouch. It was warm, like it had been sitting in sunlight. "What's in it?" "Better you don't know. Just, whatever happens tonight, whatever you see, don't look directly at it. Don't speak to it. And whatever you do," she gripped my shoulders, "don't let it know your full name." I left Maria's house as the sun was setting, the pouch around my neck and the journal in my bag. My rational mind was in full revolt. This was insane. Ghosts and guardians and thin places. It was the kind of story I'd normally mock over drinks with other journalists. But the handprint on my window had been real. The fear in Carl's voice had been real, and the look in Maria's eyes, that had been very real. I grabbed dinner at a Whataburger, trying to pretend everything was normal. Just another assignment, just another story, but my hands shook as I ate, and the pouch around my neck seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. At 11:30, I drove back toward the bridge. The roads were empty, my headlights cutting through darkness that seemed thicker than it should be. No stars tonight. Clouds covering everything like a burial shroud. Jake's van was already in the parking lot when I arrived. He was unloading equipment, cameras, audio recorders, something that looked like an old radio with too many antennae. "EMF detector," he explained when he saw me looking. "Electromagnetic fields spike around paranormal activity." "Right." I touched the pouch under my shirt, felt its warmth. "So, what's the plan?" "We set up cameras at both ends of the bridge and underneath. Audio recorders at the cardinal points. Then, we wait and watch." It took us an hour to set everything up. By the time we were done, it was past midnight. The bridge looked different in the darkness, the iron trusses like the ribs of some massive beast. No moon meant the only light came from our flashlights and the distant glow of Denton. "Ready?" Jake asked, though he looked less confident than he had in the coffee shop. I nodded, not trusting my voice. We walked onto the bridge. The wooden planks creaked under our feet, each sound echoing in the darkness like gunshots. Our flashlight beams seemed weak, swallowed by the black iron framework around us. The temperature had dropped at least 15 degrees since sunset, our breath misting in the air. "First camera's recording," Jake whispered, checking his tablet. The screen's glow made his face look ghostly. "Audio's picking up." "Wait," he frowned. "That's weird." "What?" "The ambient sound levels, they're..." He turned the tablet toward me. The audio wavelengths were flat, completely flat. There's no background noise, no insects, no wind, nothing. As soon as he said it, I realized he was right. The silence was absolute, pressing against my eardrums like water. Even our footsteps seemed muffled, absorbed by the darkness. We reached the middle of the bridge. Jake set down his equipment case, started pulling out more gear. "I want to get readings from the center point. This is where most of the sightings..." He stopped. We both heard it at the same time, breathing, deep, rhythmic, and coming from below the bridge. Jake grabbed his EMF detector. The needle was dancing wildly, numbers climbing. Holy, I've never seen readings this high. The breathing got louder, closer, but wrong, like it was coming through water or earth, not quite animal, not quite human. "Jake," My voice was barely a whisper. Maria said not to look directly at it. Maria? Who's? He stopped again. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees in seconds. Our flashlights flickered. Then we heard the hoofbeats. Slow at first, deliberate. Not on the bridge, under it. Something was moving under the bridge. Something large. Jake was fumbling with the thermal camera, hands shaking. This is incredible. The temperature variance is... Jake, I grabbed his arm. We need to go. Are you kidding? This is exactly what we came for. This is... The hoofbeats stopped. The silence that followed was worse than any sound. It was expectant, waiting. Then, a voice. But not from below anymore, from right behind us. Visitors. We spun around, our flashlights illuminated, nothing, empty bridge, but the voice came again, closer. So late, so foolish. Do you know whose bones you walk on? Jake was panning his thermal camera wildly. I'm not getting anything. How is that possible? The voice is right there, but there's no heat signature. Don't engage with it, I hissed, remembering Maria's warning. But Jake was in full investigator mode. Who are you? He called out. Are you Oscar Washburn? Laughter. But not one voice, dozens, all slightly out of sync, creating an echo that made my teeth ache. Oscar? Oh, Oscar's here. Oscar's always here. He is here. Every plank, every rivet, every scream in Athea in the metal. The voice was circling us now, sometimes left, sometimes right. But Oscar's busy, holding the door, always holding. So tired. Wouldn't you be tired, holding back the hungry dark for decades? The EMF detector in Jake's hand started smoking. He dropped it with a yelp, the plastic case melting. Our flashlights died simultaneously, plunging us into absolute darkness. But not quite absolute, because 2 points of light appeared at the far end of the bridge, pale green, like eyes, but too far apart to be human eyes. The moon is dark, the voice whispered, now seeming to come from inside my own head. The seal weakens, and we are so very hungry. The eyes started moving toward us, slow, deliberate, and as they got closer, I could make out a shape in the darkness, tall, wrong, too many angles. Like someone had tried to rebuild a human form from memory and gotten the proportions horrifically wrong. Jake was backing up, pulling me with him. The other end of the bridge, we can... No. Another voice. This one different. Older, exhausted. Don't run. Running makes it worse. A figure materialized between us and the approaching thing. Translucent. Flickering. A tall black man in overalls, but his edges kept blurring, merging with the bridge itself. Oscar. You shouldn't have come, he said, not looking at us. His attention was fixed on the thing with green eyes. Not tonight, I can't. It's too strong tonight. The thing laughed again. Let them pass, Guardian. Just 2. What harm could it do? You've held us back for so long. Don't you deserve rest? You know what you'd do if I let you pass, Oscar replied. His form solidified slightly, and I could see the strain on his face. What you'd become in their world, the hunger would spread. The door would open wider. Then we'll take them here. The thing moved faster, covering half the distance in seconds. You can't protect them and hold the seal. Oscar turned to us then. His eyes were infinitely sad. The journal. You have my journal. I nodded, unable to speak. Page 73. The binding ritual. If I fall, someone needs to... He grimaced, flickered. No, not if. When? I'm too tired, too thin. But maybe I can give you time. He spread his arms wide, and suddenly he wasn't just standing on the bridge. He was the bridge. Every iron beam glowed faintly, covered in symbols that hurt to look at. The wooden planks under our feet became warm, pulsing like a heartbeat. The thing with green eyes howled, a sound that was more feeling than noise. It charged. Run! Oscar's voice came from everywhere at once. "East End! Don't look back! Don't stop!" Jake and I ran. Behind us, the sound of impact, metal screaming, wood splintering, Oscar crying out in pain that was more than physical. The bridge bucked under our feet like a living thing. Planks cracked, iron groaned. But we kept running, the darkness pressing in from all sides. Almost there. I could see the end of the bridge, the faint outline of trees. Just a few more steps. Something wrapped around my ankle. Cold, wet, strong. I fell hard, skinning my palms on the wood. "Sarah?" Jake turned back. "No!" I screamed. "Keep going!" But he was already reaching for me. The thing around my ankle pulled harder, dragging me back toward the center of the bridge. I clawed at the planks, felt splinters drive under my nails. Then the pouch around my neck grew burning hot. The thing holding me shrieked, "Let go!" I scrambled to my feet, Jake pulling me forward. We burst off the bridge onto solid ground. Behind us, the sounds of battle continued, light and shadow warring. Oscar's voice growing weaker. "The van!" Jake gasped. "We need to—" The sound stopped, all of them, at once. We turned, couldn't help ourselves. The bridge stood empty, silent, but wrong. The iron was twisted in places, like heat had warped it. Some planks were missing entirely, showing the dark water below, and at the center, a figure stood, not Oscar, not the thing with green eyes. Something between, something new. It looked at us. When it smiled, I saw too many teeth. "The Guardian has fallen," it said in a voice like grinding stone. "The door stands open. And you've been such helpful witnesses. We needed someone to see, to know, to carry the truth back." Its smile widened impossibly. How else would we spread? Jake was pulling me toward the van, but I couldn't look away, because behind the thing, shapes were rising from beneath the bridge. Dozens, hundreds, all wrong, all hungry. "The new moon is here," the thing said, "and Oscar holds the door no more. Run, little witnesses, run and tell your story. Let others come to see, we'll be waiting." We made it to the van. Jake's hands shook so badly it took 3 tries to get the key in the ignition. As we peeled out of the parking lot, I looked back one more time. The bridge was covered in shadows that moved independently, and at the edges of the parking lot, where the streetlights met the darkness, things were testing the boundaries, seeing how far they could go. We drove in silence until we reached the highway. Then Jake pulled over, opened his door, and vomited. I sat there, staring at my bloody palms, trying to process what we'd seen. "The equipment," Jake finally said. "It's all back there, the cameras, the recordings, proof." "Jake," I showed him my palms. The splinters were moving, burrowing deeper, leaving trails of black under my skin. "I don't think proof is what we need to worry about." His face went white. He looked at his own hands, saw the same black lines spreading. "What? What is this?" I thought of the thing's smile, of its words. "We needed someone to see, to know, to carry the truth back. We're carriers," I whispered. "We've been marked. When we tell this story, when people believe..." I thought of all the viewers I'd hoped would watch, all the comments and shares I'd wanted. We're going to spread it. It's been 3 weeks since that night at the bridge. 3 weeks since Oscar fell and the door opened. 3 weeks since Jake and I became carriers. I'm writing this from my apartment in Dallas, or what's left of it. The windows are covered in salt lines that don't work. The mirrors are all turned to the walls because of what I see in them now. And the splinters, they've spread. Black veins run up both my arms now. They pulse with their own rhythm, especially at night, especially when the moon is dark. Jake has it worse. Last time I saw him, his eyes had started to change color, but that's not the worst part. The worst part is what happens when we tell the story. I tried to warn Marcus, my editor, told him to kill the article, but he thought I was having a breakdown. Published a shortened version anyway. Local journalist investigates Goatman's Bridge. Left out the supernatural elements. Focused on the historical angle. The comments started within hours. People sharing their own experiences, their own sightings, and with each comment, each share, I felt the black veins pulse harder. Then the reports started coming in. A family in Plano saw something in their backyard. Hoof prints in their garden. Their 6-year-old daughter won't stop drawing pictures of the tall goat man who watches from the trees. A jogger in Richardson found symbols carved into the trail markers at Spring Creek. The same symbols that covered the bridge when Oscar became it. She posted photos on Instagram. Got 10,000 likes. Now people are finding the symbols everywhere. Jake posted his thermal camera footage on YouTube before I could stop him. Just a few seconds of grainy video. The view counter is at 2.3 million and climbing. The comment section is full of people saying they've seen similar things. In Maine, in Oregon, in Florida, it's spreading, just like the thing said it would. Maria Washburn called me yesterday. Her voice was resigned. You've accelerated things. What might have taken decades will now take months, maybe weeks. How do we stop it? We don't. Oscar held it back for 80 years, but he was special, prepared, the new guardian. She paused. There is no new guardian. The position requires sacrifice, complete sacrifice, and in this age of skepticism and self-interest, who would believe enough to sacrifice? Who would care enough to become the door? I've been reading Oscar's journal obsessively. Page 73. The binding ritual he mentioned. It's all here. The words, the symbols, the price. To become the guardian, you don't just die. You become living infrastructure, your consciousness spread through wood and metal and stone. Forever aware. Forever holding back the hungry dark. Forever alone. But there's something else. Something Oscar didn't have time to tell us. The ritual requires 2 people. One to become the guardian, one to seal them in, and the sealer, they carry the mark forever. Never able to forget. Never able to truly sleep. Never able to escape the knowledge of what they've done. Jake found me this morning. What's left of Jake, anyway. The black veins have taken most of him now. His skin has that translucent quality, like Oscar's ghost, like he's halfway between worlds. I've been thinking, he said, his voice layered with harmonics that shouldn't exist, about what Maria said about sacrifice. Jake, no. Look at me, Sarah. He held up his hands. The fingers were too long now, the joints bent in too many places. I'm already changing, already becoming something else. Maybe I can use that. Maybe I can become the new guardian before I fully turn. I wanted to argue, but the black veins on my own arms pulsed in agreement. We were running out of time. The ritual needs 2 people, I said quietly. I know. His eyes, still partially human, met mine. Will you do it? Will you seal me in? How could I say yes? How could I condemn someone I'd known for only weeks to an eternity of conscious imprisonment? But how could I say no, when the alternative was letting the darkness spread unchecked? There might be another way, I said desperately. We could find someone else, someone stronger. Who? Who would believe us? Who would care enough? Jake laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Besides, I think this was always meant to happen. Think about it. We were both drawn to the bridge, both marked. Maybe Oscar knew his time was ending. Maybe he chose us. I thought about that first phone call from Marcus. The assignment I shouldn't have taken. The warnings I ignored. Had it all been orchestrated? Had Oscar been looking for replacements, knowing he couldn't hold on much longer? "When?" I asked. "Tonight. It has to be tonight. I can feel myself slipping. If I turn completely before the ritual..." He shuddered. "I won't want to be sealed. I'll want to feed. So here I am, writing this final entry. In 6 hours, Jake and I will return to the old Alton Bridge. We'll perform a ritual written by a man who gave up everything to hold back the dark. And I'll lose another friend to that hungry void between worlds. But first, I need to tell you something. You who've read this far. You who've listened to this story. You're marked now too. Oh, it's subtle. You might not notice for days, maybe weeks, but you'll start seeing things in the corners of your eyes. Shadows that move wrong. You'll hear hoofbeats in the distance when you're alone at night, and eventually, you'll feel compelled to visit, to see the bridge for yourself. Don't. Or do. Maybe that's what it wants. Maybe that's what I want now. The black veins singing their song of hunger and expansion. It's hard to tell where my thoughts end and the infection begins. But if you do come, if you find yourself standing at the entrance to that bridge on some dark night, remember this. Oscar Washburn held the door for 80 years. Jake Morrison will hold it for as long as he can. But eventually, every guardian falls. Every seal breaks. And when that happens, we'll need another sacrifice. Another guardian. Another person who loves this world enough to become its protector. Maybe that's you. Maybe that's why you're really listening to this story, not for entertainment, not for thrills, but because somewhere deep in your bones, you know you're being called. The bridge is waiting, it's always waiting, and whether you come tomorrow or in 10 years, it will remember you, because you've heard its story now. You're part of it, just like I am, just like Jake is about to become. Recording found on phone at Old Alton Bridge, October 31st, 2024, 11:47 p.m. Sarah, is it recording? Okay, this is Sarah Chen and Jake Morrison. We're at the Old Alton Bridge. Jake has agreed to undergo the binding ritual from Oscar Washburn's journal. I will serve as the sealer. Jake, voice distorted. Tell them why, Sarah. Tell them what they need to know. Sarah, the entities released when Oscar fell, they're spreading. Every person who hears about them, sees evidence of them, becomes a potential doorway. Jake is already partially transformed. He believes he can use that transformation, reverse it, become the new guardian. Jake, the black veins, they're not just infection, they're connection. I can feel them all now, the hungry ones. They're pressing against reality everywhere, in every shadow, every dark corner, waiting. Sarah, we're going to start the ritual now. If anyone finds this, if we fail, burn the journal. Destroy any evidence, don't let the story spread further. Sound of pages turning. Sarah, by wood and iron, by water and stone, I call upon the ancient compact. Let the willing vessel become the eternal guardian. Let flesh become foundation. Let consciousness become containment. Jake, groaning. It's working. I can feel the bridge, feel Oscar's echo in the metal. He's so tired, Sarah, so ready to rest. Sarah, I name you guardian, I name you keeper, I name you the door and the lock. Do you accept this burden? Jake, I accept. God help me, I accept. Sound of metal groaning, wood creaking. A harmony of inhuman voices crying out in rage. Sarah, it's working. The symbols are appearing on the bridge. Jake, you're... Jake, voice becoming multi-layered. I am the bridge, I am the boundary, I am... A massive impact. Sarah screams. The sound of running feet on wood. Sarah, something's wrong. The hungry ones, they're fighting back. They're trying to stop the ritual before... Silence for 13 seconds. Sarah, whispering, "Jake? Jake, can you hear me?" Jake, voice now coming from all around. "I'm here, everywhere, in every beam, every plank. I can see, oh God, I can see all of them. So many, pressing against the boundaries everywhere, not just here. The bridge was just the first crack. There are others, so many others." Sarah, "The ritual, did it work?" Jake, "Yes, no, partially. I'm holding them here. But Sarah, I'm not strong enough to seal all the cracks. Not alone. The world is too thin now, too many people believing, too many doors opening." Sarah, "What do we do?" Jake, "You finish what we started. Take the journal. Find others like us. Others who've been marked but haven't turned. Train them. Prepare them. 'Cause one guardian isn't enough anymore. We need a network. We need..." Sound of approaching footsteps. Multiple sets. Moving in sync. Sarah, "Jake, something's coming." Jake, "Run. Run. I can't hold them all. Not yet. Not alone. Run." Recording ends. Final social media post from Sarah Chen. November 1st, 2024, 3:33 a.m. If you're reading this, you're probably marked. You've seen the shadows, heard the whispers, felt the pull toward places you know you shouldn't go. I'm starting something. Call it a support group. Call it a resistance. Call it whatever you want. We meet online for now, encrypted channels. Safe spaces where we can share what we're seeing without spreading the infection further. Jake held them at the bridge. Bought us time, but there are other thin places. Other cracks where hungry things press against our world. We need guardians for all of them. Maybe you're not ready for that. Maybe you just want to understand what's happening to you. That's okay. We can help with that too. But if you're feeling the call, if you're willing to consider the ultimate sacrifice, we need to talk. The darkness is spreading, but so is the light. Find us before they find you. #Guardian Network #Thin Places Oscar New. Encrypted message found on dark web forum. Date unknown. To all guardians and potential guardians. The situation has escalated beyond our initial projections. What started at the old Alton Bridge has become a global phenomenon. We've identified 17 additional thin places across North America alone. Conservative estimates suggest over 100 worldwide. Jake Morrison continues to hold the Denton County location, but his strength wanes. He reports increasing pressure from the entities, coordinated attempts to break through. They're learning, adapting. We need volunteers for the following critical locations: Bridgewater Triangle, Massachusetts; Skinwalker Ranch, Utah; Racetrack Playa, California; Marley Woods, Missouri. The binding ritual has been refined. New safeguards are in place. But the cost remains the same: complete sacrifice, complete commitment. Forever. If you've read this far, if you've felt the calling, you know what we're asking. It's not fair, it's not right, but it's necessary. Oscar Washburn held one door for 80 years. Jake Morrison has held it for 3 months. How long will you hold yours? Contact us through the usual channels. Time is running out. S. Chen Keeper of the Journal Sealer of Guardians, bearer of the first mark. Final entry. My name is Sarah Chen. 6 months ago, I was a journalist looking for a story. Now, I'm something else. Something I don't have a name for. The black veins cover most of my body now, but I haven't turned. Not like the others. The mark of the sealer. It protects me, curses me, keeps me human enough to do what needs to be done. We have 23 guardians now. 23 souls spread across wood and stone and metal. 23 consciousness holding back the dark. I sealed each one. Watched them transform. Heard their screams become the creak of infrastructure. It's not enough. The hunger grows. The thin places multiply. And people won't stop looking, won't stop sharing, won't stop believing. Every tweet about a shadow figure adds power. Every YouTube video of unexplained phenomena opens another crack. Every podcast about true horror stories feeds them. We're fighting a losing battle against human curiosity, against our need to share our fears, to commune over horror, to prove that we're not alone in the dark. But we keep fighting, because what else can we do? If you're listening to this, if you've made it this far, you have a choice to make. You can close the story, forget about it. Try to convince yourself it was just fiction, just entertainment. Maybe that will be enough to keep you safe, or you can accept the truth, accept that you're marked now, accept that the shadows you'll start seeing are real, that the sounds in the night are getting closer, and if you're very brave or very foolish, you can reach out, find us, join us, become a guardian, become a sealer, become part of the network that stands between humanity and the hungry dark. The bridge is waiting. It's always waiting. And now, so are we. End of story. Did this story keep you up? Are you seeing shadows move differently now? Share your experience in the comments below. Like and subscribe for more true horror stories. And remember, some bridges are better left uncrossed. Unless, of course, you're ready to become one yourself. The Guardian Network is watching. We'll be in touch. Sweet dreams. Now, sleep. Or at least, try to. It's quiet now. Too quiet, but not empty. That feeling crawling up your spine, that weight pressing on your chest, that's not your imagination. You're not alone. There's something behind the curtain. You haven't looked, not because you forgot, but because you're afraid to know. You heard the whisper, software wet, wrong. Like breath dragged across broken glass. But you told yourself it was the wind, didn't you? That lie made you feel safe. Temporarily. Let me ask you, does the wind whisper your name? Does the wind tap lightly, again and again, from the same spot behind the curtain every night? Does the wind leave scratches on your window that weren't there this morning? Thin, sharp, like claws, like warnings. You don't remember opening the window. You never open the window. But it's unlocked now. You could check, you could stand up, you could walk over and pull the curtain back. But you won't, because you know. You know what's waiting, not because you've seen it, but because you felt it. In the quiet, in the dark. Every time you close your eyes, every time you wake up and your blanket is just slightly moved. Your door slightly cracked. You try to explain it. Your mind wants to explain it. But that whisper, that sound that only comes when you're alone, when everything is still, when the night is at its deepest, that's not a dream, that's a presence. It doesn't want your fear, it wants your attention. It feeds on the moment you doubt yourself. The second you wonder if you heard something, the instant your heart rate rises. That's when it leans closer. It's been patient, watching, learning you like prey. You ever notice it never shows up when the lights are on, when someone's in the room? It waits for the ritual, the brushing of your teeth, the turning off of lights, the last look at your phone, the deep breath just before sleep. That's when it wakes up. That's when it stirs behind the curtain. Sometimes it watches you all night. Sometimes it moves. A shift in the shadow. A faint creak on the floorboards. The sound of fabric sliding over skin. And when you don't check, when you ignore it, that's when it comes closer. Not fast, not loud, just closer. You might feel a cold spot on the bed. You might feel breath on your neck. You might hear a whisper in your ear that sounds almost like your voice. It copies, it mimics, it blends, not to confuse you, to prepare you, because soon it won't need the curtain, it won't need shadows, it will sit beside you, stand behind you, speak through you. You won't even know when it happens. You'll wake up, look in the mirror, and something will be off. Your eyes won't blink quite right, your smile will linger too long. Your reflection will move just a little after you do. And the people around you? They'll say you seem different. Not worse, just not you. But tonight you're still you. Still in control, for now. You could still check. You could still confront it. Pull the curtain back, face it, but deep down, you've already made your choice. You won't. Because you'd rather lie still, let your eyes drift shut, and hope sleep comes quickly. And it will. But what you wake up as might not be the same. Now, if you've made it this far, congratulations. You're not just a viewer, you're part of something bigger. Something that watches with you, that sits beside you as you watch, as you listen, as you wait. Because this story doesn't end when the screen fades to black. It follows you into the next room, into your dreams, into your reflection. If you liked this story, like, share, and subscribe, so you don't miss the next one, so we don't miss you, and comment below. Tell us the moment you stopped feeling alone. We're watching, we're listening, and we read everything. Now, go ahead, gain the courage to check the dark corners before you sleep. Turn off the lights, close your eyes, sleep well, if you can.